In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Grizzlies writer Drew Hill, joined as always by columnist Chris Herrington. We join you Thursday, November the 13th. The Grizzlies coming off of two pretty miserable losses on the East Coast to the Celtics and the Knicks. They also lost to the Thunder on Sunday. And they beat the Dallas Mavericks, I believe, since the last time we recorded. So the Mavericks game felt like one that was an opportunity to stop the bleeding for the Grizzlies after they had lost four straight, and they were able to get that done. Then they lose to OKC, lose to the Knicks. They have the Celtics game sandwiched in between two more games on the road against the Spurs and the Cavs. Felt like the Celtics game was another opportunity to stop the bleeding last night for the Grizzlies, and it was a complete mess. What did you make of the game last night, Chris?
Yeah, the Celtics game is the big bummer in the whole shebang because it's disappointing as the OKC and the Knicks games might have been. When you factor in who they're playing, who they have on the floor, the issues around the team, the ultimate outcomes were probably about right, really. Oklahoma City is clearly the best team in the league. I think the Knicks, I know they're not first in the standings. I think they're probably the best team in the East. So those are sort of normal games to some degree, even though there were some bad stretches, good stretches and bad stretches from the Grizzlies in those games. The Celtics game looked like a big opportunity. And, on the front end, I thought, okay, I was thinking about that game in the context of having John Morant and maybe having Zach Edey. I still wonder, could Zach Edey not have come back one game early, really? I mean, could they really not have played Zach Edey in that game in Boston against the team that had like the second worst defensive rebounding in
Can I
basketball?
jump in here on that?
Yeah.
I think Zach Edey's going to play on Saturday. We don't know this.
Right.
I don't know if it's certain that he's going to play on Saturday. I think if I were to guess, I would say yes. But I think that you might be right on that, but I just think that he still might be one away. So, I don't think that just to push back, I push back a little bit on the Celtics thing. Maybe he's just ready now, and you're right. But, I think that there's 2 days, right, between now and Saturday. So that it is, somewhat of a significant amount of time. I don't know.
Yeah, no, they're following their process, so it is what it is. But, thinking about that game in terms of having John Morant and maybe having Zach Edey, it seemed like a very fruitful game. But honestly, even with neither of those players, they should have been a lot better than it was. Now, granted, they are playing that game with all four players on their point guard depth chart out. They're starting Vince Williams at point guard, and I've been a champion of Vince as a player, and I think he's acquitted himself very well since coming back. He's not a point guard. Cam Spencer is not a point guard. So you're playing that whole game on the road without a real point guard. Even then, it should have been a much better effort than it was. Even accounting for that, I think that was a very disappointing Jaren Jackson Jr. game on both ends of the floor. I think there's been a lot of focus on his offense, and sort of justifiably so. He should have that was a night for him to go big with no John against that Celtics front line, and he just couldn't do it. He had 19, 20 points, decent shooting, but the volume should have been way, way higher. He cost himself a lot of attempts by getting offensive fouls against subpar defenders. People get annoyed about the foul stuff. To me, it's contextual, and the context there is you should have scored, not gotten offensive fouls, right? It's not the foul trouble. It's you didn't get a shot attempt out of that. Instead, you got an offensive foul. And then on the defensive end, and this is something I wrote about this week, it's gotten very little attention. But to me, the big glaring thing with Jaren is not the offensive stuff. It's not the volume of the shots. It's not the fouls. It's the defense. They got savaged defensively in stretches of both of these games, and he is there, and he's having no impact on team defense. And that has not been normal. Jaren Jackson Jr. has carried good team defense with him on the floor most of his NBA career. And for whatever reason, he is not having a defensive impact on these games. And I think the point guard injuries really impacts the offense. John Morant's play really impacts the offense. Not having Zach Edey because the Isla wants to run, build a lot of what he wants to do off of the screen and the offensive rebounding. All that stuff sort of explains to a large degree a lot of the offensive problems they're having. Not having Ty Jerome doesn't hurt their defense. The John Morant had playing subpar. He's been a subpar defender already. I think Edey is good defensively when he plays with Jaren, but they were bad defensively last year when Edey played without Jaren. They should be a lot better defensively than they've been. And to me, that's gotten very little attention, but that really leaps out to me these last couple games.
Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, they've been bad on both ends, right? So
Right.
naturally, the ability to put the ball in the basket seems to be the most talked about thing in the league. Not necessarily the defensive side. I think you're right about that. I I hope for Jaren's sake, who's just having not a very good season, by the way, just to
Right.
start. And I think has been to some degree that hasn't been talked about quite as much because of Ja's public,
That's right.
comments on his coaches, and that has protected Jaren a little bit.
There's so much justifiable focus on John Moran and Thomas Isalo that it sort of obscures a lot of the rest, right? And
Right.
Jaren's right next in line. Yeah.
And so, you know, I forget exactly where I was going there before I got sidetracked, but he's not having a great season. Oh, I know where I was going. I think Edey coming back is the real chance to spark something like that, to spark him defensively a little bit.
I agree.
Just because, and we talk about what Edey will mean for Ja because we talk about offense. It's like, oh, look, Ja's going to have a screener. Ja's going to have somebody who can clean up those misses and generate second chance points for the Grizzlies. Yeah, that's great. But Zach Edey takes up so much space defensively and just gobbles up floor that I think, it's gonna allow Jaren to roam a little bit more, be the
Yeah.
weak side defender, helper, that he's excelled in his entire career. I think if the return of Edey's helping anybody, it's gonna be Jaren more so than even Ja. So, yeah, it's definitely been a disappointing season for Jaren. Was there anything from that Knicks game that stood out? I mean, that was just it's
thought,
the Grizzlies getting beat by a team that's better than them. Honestly, is what it felt like.
yeah, there were stretches, and the turnovers killed them. The turnovers and the defense are the two things that killed them, and that's quite the double whammy. I thought when they weren't turning the ball over, the offense was working pretty well, right? And that's a pretty big caveat. But given the context of the inherent problems they have offensively in terms of not having the ball handlers and not having Edey, I think you've seen some improvement in the kind of shots they get, in the flow, more cutting. I think in that Knicks game, the offense looked really good for stretches of that Knicks game, and that's a team that has been a top 10 defense on the season. Um, I think you can see some small signs of some players getting comfortable with the system. Now, when you don't have a point guard and guys are missing wide open threes again, which was again the case, against the Celtics, like it had been early in the season, then a lot of that stuff doesn't matter as much. But I thought the Knicks game showed some real growth on the offensive end, other than the turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, Ja obviously struggled with the turnovers in that game. He struggled with them quite a bit. He's also not been like it hasn't been the post games, if you've paid attention to them, have not been like they were after the Lakers incident where they were like tense. Ja's been in a better mood, but also, he's basically put his hand up a little bit and said, I got to be better with these turnovers, like I'm killing us with the turnovers. And that's not a one game thing. He's mentioned it multiple times now at this point. And I think it's good that he's taking ownership of that, but also, it he's just not playing very well. Like he's just in general, he's just not playing very well.
Right.
And so like I know everyone's still hyper focused on the Isolo stuff and like the coach, the players don't like the coach, but also the players can just have stretches where they don't play very well. And it feels like we're going through a stretch where Ja's just not playing very well. I don't see the riff or tiff or whatever the word is I'm supposed to be using here back and forth between Ja and Isolo anymore on the court. Like it feels like that's. I'm not saying that it's all sunshine and rainbows, but I think Ja's just playing bad right now to some degree, and he's taking ownership of that in the post game.
Yeah, I mean, so much is going wrong for the Grizzlies the last couple of weeks that it's like a full menu. Like you had a full menu to choose from, and so whatever tends to irritate you most, you can grab a hold of that and say that's the thing, and like it's a worthy thing because there's just so much across the board. The Ja thing, I mean, I don't want to sidetrack the pod into like big picture stuff too much, but to me this whole thing is sort of a two track like this season and then big picture because I think they had big picture decisions to make over the course of the season, which I've been saying since the Bain trade, and like there's the Ja question of like why he's playing poorly now and what can get him back on track. And then there's just the big picture question of like what he can still be, right? What he can still be is definitely better than what he's been the last couple of weeks. There's no question about that. But they got there's still a big picture question there of where can you go with him as the lead guard and when can you get there and although there's still that big picture stuff. And a lot of people are anxious for big changes. Like I know a lot of fans are ready to see guys get traded, guys get fired, all this kind of stuff. Nothing like that is going to happen for it. I mean, we can always be surprised, but it seems likely to me, as I've been saying, nothing of that ilk is going to happen for at minimum another month, and maybe longer than that, but at minimum another month. And so I think they've got at least a month to try to like just get themselves together, and they're taking their lumps right now, but the game's just going to keep coming. And nothing structurally is going to change, and they're just going to have to keep plugging away and try to get themselves together.
Yeah, I didn't run it, but at one point this week I wrote a column about the Ja trade stuff. Just tried to touch on all the notes, like it keeps coming up, it keeps coming up, it feels avoidable. People on the outside don't necessarily understand the emotional attachment that the city and people around this place have to Ja for a number of different reasons, but especially because of his loyalty to here so far in his career and why I thought that matters. But also, like what you just said, like where are the Grizzlies going and when can they get there is an important question, especially when taking the context of the way that Ja is playing right now. Obviously, he can play better than he's playing right now. No one has any doubts about that. But I think the question for the Grizzlies is, despite how weird the season is, despite how odd it's felt and off it's felt and coach drama and like the question we had before the season, still the question we're asking now, which is like, are Ja and Jaren good enough to be your star players on a team that's going to be contending for a championship? And I think more importantly, that question may be because you're not going to see the returns of the Desmond Bain trade for another 2 years. How good are those players going to be in 2 to 3 years? That's what the Grizzlies still have to figure out, and they don't have to make that decision right now. So we've got time. We've got time, as Chris said.
Yeah,
I'll echo that. We have time.
They're not going to make that decision right now, I don't think. But the first 3 weeks are evidence, right? And they're evidence that is discouraging to that question. But I think there's more season to come, and it's just something they're going to have to evaluate in the weeks and perhaps months ahead. And the same thing goes for Isolo, right? It's a different question with him. Is that hire going to work out or not? I think the jury is out. For some people, the jury's in, but I would say for me, the jury is out. For the organization, I think the jury is out. And so, they're just going to have to keep plugging away, and then I think over time it'll get evaluated again. But now they're in a bad spot right now. Edey, it sounds like will come back in the next couple games. It seems likely. Hopefully the Ja thing is a 1 game, back to back ankle rest situation, and the schedule. I mean, they got Cleveland and San Antonio coming up, but at some point, the schedule will ease up a little bit. They're in the middle of a stretch of playing really good teams most nights, and that will ease up. This team started 3-2. That was in part because the schedule at the beginning of the season was easy, right, and then it got harder, and so it'll lighten up again, and we'll see where they go.
I want to go back. We did get sidetracked with big picture stuff a little bit, but can we go back to the Boston game real quick before we move on? So they shoot 10 for 43 from 3.
Right.
I mean, that this was something that it was identified as a weakness coming into the season was like I don't know if this is going to be a very good 3-point shooting team. It's been a small sample, but it's been worse than I think you would think it would be.
Well,
And then
I mean,
yeah,
that's another. We talk about the ball handling with Jerome and Pippen, but those guys were going to play off the ball a bunch too, and like those are both 40% 3-point shooters last season.
right. So it's creating the fact that like the thing about the NBA is that guys rarely miss those wide open threes. Like, this isn't college basketball, right? The shot making quality is just so much higher at this level. But the Grizzlies don't have that,
No,
right? And there's not a lot of NBA teams that, are that way. Almost every NBA team has guys that make open shots. But the Grizzlies so far this season just don't have guys that make open shots.
I,
It's the
I don't know.
challenge.
I don't know about you, but for me, the only guy in the rotation right now who, if he misses a wide open, I think we say this in the pod, a wide ass open three. The only guy I'm surprised is Cam Spencer
Yeah.
if he misses a completely open shot.
Yeah, who's the second most trust on the court now? And KCP's off, by the way. He went out with an elbow injury. He said he was dealing with some nerve thing on Sunday because I don't remember if I asked him about it or somebody else, but lots of us were noticing that he was grabbing his elbow in the middle of that Thunder game. He said it was like a nerve thing, but he's going to ice it and he's going to be good. But it's like when he gets hit, he feels it. Well, now he
Right.
exits last night in the third quarter. So take KCP out of the equation. Who's the second most trustworthy 3-point shooter on this team?
You can keep him in the equation. That's probably not my answer. I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know who the answer is. Any answer you come up with feels like the wrong answer.
I know. I feel like it has to be Jaren or Santi.
I was gonna say Jaron or Santi. I actually was. I think percentage wise it's Landale, but even though he keeps going in, I don't feel that way quite about it. I actually feel better about Jaron and Santi with the open look than I do, any of the other guards or wings other than Spencer. Yeah.
Santi's had double digit scoring and he was the only plus in the plus minus department against Boston. Double digit scoring 7 straight games.
He's been playing hard. He's still not really, he's more of a finesse player than physical player, and he will try some fancy passes that go awry. Both of those things are sort of ingrained. But if you just sort of, take those things as like things that are just there, he's been playing hard. He has been a guy who's played hard, has been a dynamic presence, is out on the floor, hustling and trying to make things happen. I think in the context of a team that has not been playing well, he's been one of the guys who's been playing among the best relative to his ability. I think Santi's had a pretty good stretch, all things considered.
Okay, I want to move onward to Edey and to Isolo a little bit, but first let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Okay, let's start with Isolo here. Obviously, there's a lot of fans that think it's time he go already because the team is not playing up to their expectation. I'm in a weird. I hope you can help me tell me how to feel here, Chris.
Yeah.
I think coming into the season, it's sort of true that the Grizzlies they did trade away Desmond Bane to get first round draft picks. They did try to implement a brand new system. I don't necessarily think they made strides to be more of a contender in the Western Conference this season. Maybe what the moves that they made were to hopefully create a better contention window. But I also feel like this start has been disappointing and the team can play better than this. I think on one hand you have this idea of like, well, the Grizzlies weren't really making a step forward anyway if you look at what they did. Maybe they were even taking a step back. so this should have been expected. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, you just got blown out by the Celtics by 30, and the Celtics were 5-7 when you went to go play them, and it's been a mess. So how should I feel about this, Chris? How should I feel about the coaching, so far this season relative to what the team expectations should have been? Does that make
Well,
sense?
yeah, I mean, two things can be true, and in this case, they are. On one hand, Islo and the coaching staff are sort of operating at a deficit given the injuries, not only given the number of injuries, but the specifically targeted nature of the injuries at point guard and center, and how those specifically targeted injuries impact the style they want to play. Like we knew this before the ball went up opening night, right? That's a big problem for them and what they want to do. Even when you factor that in, I think it's fair to say the team has underperformed, even accounting for that, and that you don't see the level of cohesion. And I don't know, buy-in is sort of presumptuous, right? We've talked about that. Buy-in is not is something you sort of guess at. I think what you can see is a lack of cohesion on the floor, a lack of consistent energy on the floor, defense that sort of sags away when the team starts to have struggle. And that reflects upon the coaching staff. Like, getting guys to play hard and play together is sort of, maybe number one thing on the job. And I don't think anyone can look at it and say that has gone well or as well as it could, even accounting for the injuries. So I think it's been a disappointing performance all around, including from the coaches. But what I would say also is that this is this team underperforming reasonable expectations, even accounting for injuries. Yeah, at least a little bit it is. But what was the reasonable expectation in a big picture sense? We talked about this before the season. Everyone, like almost everyone, except for John Hollinger, who had them being worse, everyone had them as a play-in team. Like, everybody universally thought they were going to play-in team, and they're one game out of the play-in, like 12 games into the season, right? With 70 games to go or whatever. So they're kind of right there in that respect. And then the other thing is that because that was the expectation. Like, I've seen some comparison to like the David Blatt thing in Cleveland, right? David Blatt was a successful international coach, and they bring him over and he struggles and they end up letting him go. Well, that was a team with LeBron James in his prime that needed to compete for a title. And Ja Morant is not LeBron James, especially not right now. And so the idea that this is not going well, we have to hit the eject button because we have to fix it right now, that kind of pressure is not there. There may be fans who feel that, but that is not the reality of the situation. The reality was, we're probably going to be a play-in team, but we're a play-in team that's trying to like build something that will be better in the seasons to come. And whether that's happening or not, that's an open question. But the pressure is not there on the coaching situation where you would conceive of any kind of quick decision on it, because this is not a team. This is not a team that needs to win a title, and now you look up and you're 5-8 and you're panicking. That is just not the situation here.
Yeah, I feel like, okay, there's a few things to this equation, but two things that work in opposite of each other that I think, get talked about a lot, I guess, online. Like, they work in opposite of each other. One is, I don't think you know, in terms of them moving past it with the Ja and Isolo thing, when something happens like that, obviously it's going to stick. It's always going to be there. You can't just wave a magic wand and make it go away. But I haven't heard or seen with my eyes anything along the lines of like Ja still being difficult, or those two not being able to get on the same page, or anything of that nature. But so in that case, you may say, oh well, the players just aren't playing very good. But I think you're right. Clearly, the team isn't playing with the same level of effort and energy that they should be playing with on a night in and night out basis, and that does reflect on the coach. So,
he still basically said this after the Boston game, right? He said it was disappointing to look up and see the other team doing what we want to be doing, and that's playing with the greater energy.
There's also just a lot of misinformation out there, by the way, on the Grizzlies coaching stuff. Like, just
still.
I mean, it's wild. Like, the Grizzlies were not going to hire Mike Malone. They were never, like, that was not a thing that was considered. That was not, no, that wasn't a thing. I promise. And the players did want Islo to be the coach. John Jaron wanted Tomas Islo to be the coach last year. And, obviously they have the right to change their opinion at some point if they want to. But, I think that overall Islo and the job that he's done has been disappointing so far. And it is a what have you done for me lately league. I sent you that. He said something on Sunday, and I sent it to you, Chris, where he mentioned something like, I know that, everybody wants to live in the moment when we talk about the NBA and that, these games happen every other day, but this is a process that's going to take months, sometimes years. What did you make of that comment? Was that like, hey, I need more time here. I know everyone's frustrated, but I need more time here before we start grilling or drilling down on some of the stuff that's happening here. That's what I
Yeah,
took it as.
yeah, no, I think that's accurate. There's a tension there when you talk about years, and that's the tension about, do you have years with these with your current lead players? But the question is even it's not even like, what can you do over the next 3-4 years with those guys? There's also a question of like, what could you do now, right? I think there's an evaluation. There's going to be an ongoing evaluation of John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. as like the best players on a team, and there's going to be an ongoing evaluation of Tomas Islo as the NBA head coach. And while those three people are working together, to me, to some degree, those are separate evaluations. You're not evaluating, can John Morant and Jaren Jackson work with Islo? You're sort of evaluating, can they work as the top two guys on a team that can compete, go deep in the playoffs, compete for a title, and can they do that going forward? And you're evaluating if Islo, is gonna, if you think he's a good head coach. And I do think to some degree those are separate evaluations. And they could both be evaluated positively over time. They could both be evaluated negatively over time. There could be a split decision, but it's not, I think they're separate things. But the years thing just brings up a question of like the long range thinking of the team. And I don't know if they know where they're at as far as that is. I think this season's about figuring that out.
Onward away from the coaching stuff. Zach Edey probably coming back. We mentioned how he might help Jaren, how he might help Ja. What are the reasonable expectations for Zach when he gets back on the court here?
Oh, I assume he'll be limited minutes wise for a few games. I don't know whether he'll start. Like when the KCP injury happened at Boston, I sort of wondered, are we going to roll out Saturday with the starting lineup of John Morant, Jalen Wells, Cedric Howard, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey? Like, is that going to roll out? And it might, but it might not. KCP might be back. I think there's a good chance, even if Edey makes his debut because of the minutes limit, that they might wait a couple games before putting him back in the starting lineup. So I don't think he's going to play more than 20 minutes probably the first couple games. That's sort of their history. And he obviously needs time. There needs to be patience with him to get his wind, and he hasn't played in the system with these players, and so people should be patient with it. Zach Edey is a long-term proposition for the Grizzlies, clearly. I think they're obviously evaluating the better players, which are John Morant and Jaren Jackson, but like Zach Edey and Cedric Howard need to be like long-term pieces, no matter regardless of which way it goes. And so I think everyone will be happy to have him back. I think he'll be effective because he's enormous, but I think he won't be his best self for a little while.
Yeah, I think both you and I said prior to the season that we expected big impact from Edey, or at least, him to be solid just because the physical tools aren't going away unless the ankle's still bothering him.
Right, right.
And he's returning here, I think, right in the dead center, if not maybe a little bit on the front end of his projected return to play to window. He's warmed up. He seems to be moving around pretty good, but until we see him, trying to box out somebody that's 7 feet 300 pounds or 7 feet 250 or whatever, it is.
Well, we might be seeing him against Wemby
see.
in a few days.
Yeah, that game got moved to NBC.
That's a welcome back to the league kind of game for Zach Edey, right? Either at his second or potentially first if he doesn't play Saturday.
What, Jared Allen first, and then Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, there you go. Well, welcome back, guy.
Yeah, not exactly easing him in on that one. Maybe Celtics, to your point, would have been a little bit more of an easing game, but Zach Edey wasn't changing the score of that one. I can tell you that much.
Here's the question: since we
Yeah.
won't talk again on a pod until probably after that Spurs game, I'm guessing we haven't scheduled it out, but that game's coming on Tuesday, so that's pretty soon. So to me, Zach Edey, Wemby. I mean, Zach is not in the same category as Wemby, but like to me, that's an interesting matchup. Hopefully for years to come, these two giant dudes in the same division. Ja said very early on there was a game. It was one of the first games of the season where there was the lob that Vince Williams threw, and or maybe not that one. He went up to get that one, but there was some other play where maybe Cedric Howard didn't throw a lob. He was like, my legs weren't ready for that anyway. I wanted him to give me the ball so I could throw him the lob. Remember Josh saying that? Is he going to try? Is having Wemby on the floor going to bring it out of him? Is he going to try to?
No. I'm going to answer that right now. I got the answer to that right now.
Okay.
No. And the answer to that is no. I'm not trying to be disappointing. The answer to that is no, because he tried to rise up on Hartenstein in that Thunder game and barely got off the floor.
Yeah.
And he, I forget, like, I don't think it was like during the traditional media session. And this isn't anything that's like, I don't think anyone would care if I said this, but like after the cameras had turned off, he was talking about like, oh man, I came back at halftime and watched the highlight of that one and was like, dang man, can nobody tell me I just wasn't even close on that? Like,
right.
I barely got off the floor right there. I don't see that. Maybe, but I'd be happy to be surprised there and we get some of that. But I think that's one of the real questions. I mean, not to just go back and revisit what we talked about in the first 10 minutes about the future of the franchise and all of that, but like the Grizzlies are going to have to decide if this Ja stuff is a speed bump right now or if this is a trend, because he is attacking the rim at a much, much lower rate, which means he's changing his game. And sometimes players can effectively change their game, and it takes time to do that. And Ja does have other skills, mainly passing, that can make him a super effective NBA star player.
Right.
But the question is, if he does change his game, how much does that take away? Because I think to some degree it is smart for Ja to try to avoid some of the impact, of driving it to the basket every play and just the blows you're going to take on a night-to-night basis doing that. I think some of that is smart. But it also does something that really hurts the Grizzlies offensively when he's not doing that, and that's, it takes away paint touches, it takes away the gravity that he's able to create, and that's, I think, hurt the offense. So the Grizzlies have to find a way, if this is going to be the new form of Ja, to either make this new form of Ja that's not going to attack the basket as much the most effective that they can, or they have to acknowledge, wait, we just may not have that Ja that we've had in previous years.
Well, the other piece of that is the shooting, right? I mean, even with his elite vision and playmaking and handle, I think all that's still there. I think it's all elite, even with the turnover problems he's had. I think the roster and lineups around him have not weaponized his passing the way they could. I think that's an issue. That's not.
I mean, they can't even catch some of these passes.
Right.
That's making a shot. Yeah,
that's an environmental issue. I wrote it this week about, I called the Ja Morant pie chart, like environment, how much is environment, how much is mood, how much of it is ability approach. And like there are environmental problems that are not his creation, clearly. But if he's going to get to the paint less and get to the rim less, that has to be offset by better shooting. You're shifting more shots to the perimeter. You got to make more of them. And he's made less. His shooting has been terrible. And there was the stat that's been thrown around. Nekias Duncan from the Dunker Spot Pod, who does a great job. Him and Steve Jones, who's a former video guy for the Grizzlies. They did a whole thing on Ja, and Nekias threw out the stat about Ja seeing multiple defenders on his drives, a higher rate of multiple defenders than any other player in the league. Now, part of that is the environmental problems we've talked about, like the multiple defenders to have multiple defenders, the guy's got to leave somebody else, right? And so that's part of the environmental problem. But part of that is that they're just loading up on the Ja's drives because they're not worried about him making jump shots. And so part of the problem there is environment. It's the lineups around him. But part of it is he's not making anything from the perimeter, which he sort of has to do if you're not going to be as dynamic.
at some point, he's going to start making some of these shots from the perimeter more than he's making now. I mean, he's shooting
100, yes,
95% from the free throw line. I mean, it's
right.
just he's not this bad of a shooter. He's just not.
You're right.
It goes back to this idea of like point the finger at whoever you want to point it at for the big picture Grizzlies problems so far, the disappointing start. But I think, some of the frustration, especially for Ja and Jaren, is on themselves that they're just not playing the way that they're capable of playing. It's not all I don't get the sense that they're just pushing blame onto everyone else but themselves. Like, I think there's also frustration
No,
that they
I
know that they
agree.
can play better.
Ja's not blaming anybody else for him missing a jump shot.
Right. No, he's not.
Jared is not blaming anybody else for him like getting handsy in the post with Jordan Walsh and getting an offensive foul he doesn't need to get. Right. Those are John Jaren problems, and they know that.
Anyway, I think that will wrap things up for us today. Chris, you wrote a column earlier this week. People should go read that. I may have something out later today. I'm recording this on Thursday morning. Might get into some Cedric Coward stuff. We didn't talk very much Cedric Coward today.
Yeah, my Grizzlies 25 series continues apace.
Yes.
A slow pace this week.
Yes.
I sing a song of Slow Mo. Kyle Anderson in at number 22. Shout out to Slow Mo. Wasting away in Salt Lake City this season.
Oh, man. I mean, what a bummer. That's, always been one of your guys. Quickly became one of my guys as we covered the last team there. But, yeah, fun one. So go read that. As I said, I've got some stuff on Cedric Coward that will go up later today. Cedric Coward, by the way, real quick, one of the best rebounding. I have a bone to pick with with NBA.com. They say he's a guard. I would say he's not a guard.
No, I don't think he's a guard.
They qualify him as a guard. But in terms of players and they also say Scotty Barnes is a guard. So like those two are probably cut from similar cloth positionally. But anyway, when you compare him to like most guards that play on the wing and then even some of the superstar guys that just have the ball all the time like Luka, he is perhaps the best rebounder in the NBA positionally.
Well, this was I had a bit in my column on Monday that I didn't cut it out because I didn't finish writing it, but I cut it out in outline form or whatever, just because of the length that it was going to be the four things I like this week, which I like to try to do, and I've done once this season because of the Josh stuff and all the mess. There are things to like if you're watching close, and one of my four things was going to be the team's defensive rebounding. I think that's the one area where they've sort of overachieved. Because without Zach Edey, they've been pretty decent. They've been an above average defensive rebounding team on the season without Zach Edey. And like, how does that happen? And it's a group effort. And like Cedric Howard's prominent in that. He's been a very good defensive rebounder for his position. Cam Spencer has been a surprisingly good defensive rebounder for his position. Vince Williams coming back has given them more pop. And I don't know, this may have changed these numbers as of 2 games ago. So it may have changed. But even Jaren Jackson's defensive rebounding rate was actually higher. Good. Was higher than it was a career high, at least as of Monday, it was a career high in Santi Aldama. There's been a decent group effort on the boards there, but Cedric Coward is prominent in that.
Yeah, Cedric Coward had the second most contested rebound. This was entering the Knicks game. Second most contested rebounds on the team at that point, but also had second most, contested defensive rebounds. Also had 13 deferred defensive rebounds, meaning he just let his teammate get the rebound when he had the chance to grab the ball, which was a high number. But one of the things that really interested me, and you'll see it if you read the column, I'll talk more about it. The NBA tracks average distance to rebound. So like where you grabbed the rebound. And Cedric Coward has the lowest number on the team. And to me, that suggests a willingness to play physical and battle with bigs, because there he is, with such a high defensive rebounding rate and also grabbing rebounds around the rim. I think, he's just been super, super aggressive in that department for the Grizzlies, and he's awesome. He's just a very good basketball player. You discover that every single game. It's been fun to watch. But okay, we got sidetracked. We got to get out of here. Chris has to go. But we will be back next week talking more Grizzlies. We'll see how this road trip finishes out. You got Cleveland on Saturday, San Antonio on Tuesday. For Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.